Hello and welcome to the Autism, ADHD and Us 3 podcast with me, Jenny Lucas. We'll be talking all things neurodiversity, including late diagnosis, parenting and everything else that comes in between. This podcast is not intended to be diagnostic. I am not a doctor. These are our personal experiences peppered with research and occasionally the experiences of others. The podcast is intended as a supportive guide through the experience of parenting neurodiverse children as a late diagnosed person, hopefully bringing some relatable stories and laughs along the way. Any relevant links will be in the show notes. Let's get into today's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. I'm using a new piece of software to record this today, so for those of you listening audibly, I hope it's good. I hope the quality still is good. For those of you that are watching, I'm video recording this and that'll be up on YouTube for anyone that wants to go along and watch. And it's made me feel slightly awkward because people can see me now. And anyway, so the topic of today's podcast, funnily enough, is attention seeking. And I want to look at that in inverted commas, attention seeking, from the perspective of being an ADHD person and what that means to me and the impact that that's had on my life and what that might mean for you out there and how we tackle it with our children. So for me, attention seeking is not something that I've actively sought out to do very often in my life, but it's a way sometimes that behaviours can be categorised as an ADHD person. And I haven't done any podcasts yet on stimming, but if you're unaware of what stimming is, it is sort of repetitive, physical or vocal behaviours, patterns that people can do as a way of showing distress, as a way of seeking comfort, as a way of regulating. And when I initially was sort of thinking and looking into sort of autism in any sort of sense, and I actually did look into that when I was a teenager about whether I could be autistic or not. Teenagers were not autistic. Teenage girls were not autistic in the early noughties, obviously. Stimming and sort of the way that stimming was portrayed was hand flapping or like clapping or sort of those sort of repetitive physical movements, and I didn't identify with that. I did not stim in those ways, and so therefore I was like, well, I can't be autistic because I don't do those things. However, there are lots and lots of other ways to stim, and I have vocal stims. So I remember when I was at high school, I must have been I was in the sixth form definitely because of the high school I was at. And my boyfriend at the time, his little sister, was also at high school with us. And she was fascinated by me a little bit, I think, because of the way that I behaved. And when I was in a comfortable environment, and I did find secondary school, for the most part, quite a comfortable environment. And I know how lucky I am to be able to say that, because I know that is the vast majority of ADHD people have not had that experience. But I used to wander around school singing. I'd just hum to myself, or I'd sing things out loud. I'd turn things into songs using like other tunes that existed. I'm not professing to be any sort of great composer here. I am not a great composer, but I can spin a melody into different lines. I can use different text with a melody and create new versions of it, if you like. And she used to pick up on this every time I'd be walking somewhere on my own. She'd be like, "You're always singing, you must be so happy." And I was like, yeah, I'm always singing, because I was a singer, I was a musician, and I am still a singer and a musician, but I was very much known for that when I was at school. I was one of the music department kids, and I did have singing lessons, and I was doing my singing exams, and I was applying to go to uni to do music, and so I was a muso from that perspective, and I was really proud of that, because that like reinforced my personality, if you like, the soul and core of my being. So I'd go about and I'd be singing, and I quite enjoyed that. And I think that the fact that she had picked up on it in such a nice way was like a good thing. However, there's other times where, particularly in like a meltdown situation or the approach to a meltdown, where I'd be feeling overwhelmed, and I might be short-tempered, and I might get louder, and I might start to sort of display more distressed behaviours. People called that attention-seeking, dramatic. How many times have you been called dramatic in your life? And that really cut me to the core, because from being a very young child, I've tried very hard not to be outwardly dramatic, not to outwardly seek attention in loud and dramatic ways. And I was around plenty of people that could be loud and dramatic, and I found that really irritating. I'm not going to dig into the psychology behind why I found that irritating at this time, but other people's sort of very flamboyant and dramatic behaviour was annoying for me, probably sensorially, but for other reasons too. And so to be accused of being attention seeking was like a knife through the fucking heart, I'm not going to lie. I found that really difficult to deal with, and it made things worse. And if you're watching this video, you may well have noticed that I've been gesticulating a lot with my hands, and I do gesticulate a lot with my hands. I talk with my hands. I express physically when I'm talking, and people call that attention seeking, dramatic. Some people get away with it like being a flair for the creative. I don't think I ticked the eccentric box enough to be called like having a flair for their dramatics. But it was something that I always found really uncomfortable, and so therefore I worked really hard to try and suppress those parts of myself as much as possible. And what I found really challenging since discovering my ADHD-ness later in life is allowing those things to come back out of myself, and people accusing me of being oversensitive or dramatic or playing up to being the autistic stereotype and all those things. And that is really challenging, because it's hard when you're around people who've known you for a long time to help people understand that even though you've been around them for a long time, that they didn't really wholly know who you were, and that you are now just expressing what's been inside for that whole time. So there's a few different things tied up into that, isn't there, in terms of stimming and unmasking, but I want to look at it today particularly from that sort of attention-seeking perspective, because it's something that I still struggle with in life, and it's something that both of the children struggle with. Now, I think I struggle with it particularly because if you were born in the 80s or earlier, or even in the 90s, depending on what kind of parents you had, what environment you grew up in, it was still kind of part of the children are seen and not heard era-ish, in terms of like the emotional immaturity of the adults round about you and their inability to handle your big feelings or your expressions of yourself in ways that were not societally expected. That's not what I want to say at all. That were not socially acceptable. There we go. That's a phrase I'm looking for. And I had parents in particular, one in particular, who was very conscious of how we behaved in public, because that was like a reflection on them and their ability to be a good parent. And so we learned from quite an early age, mostly, to be very careful about how we expressed ourselves in public, not to embarrass anyone, not to do anything that was remotely embarrassing or upsetting or attention-seeking in any way. And sort of not in public, having reflected on this quite a lot over the last few years, and also being a parent myself and having that experience too, I think that, the adults round about me a lot of the time had their own stuff going on, and therefore didn't have capacity for anybody else's stuff to be going on, alongside the fact that little children don't have big feelings. They can't be sad or depressed or like have any sort of serious things going on that would equate to the same level of seriousness or discomfort that an adult was experiencing. And I find that quite fascinating now that I've got my own children, to think that children can't be stressed or overwhelmed or sad or upset to the same degree that an adult can, because we're all just big children in adult bodies. Of course they can. Of course they can feel those things and experience those things. And invalidating their experience of that is really damaging, hugely damaging, to their own feelings of self-worth and self-esteem. So I think you learn quite quickly on, don't you, about being safe and wanting to feel safe and secure. So potentially you then learn what behaviours are safe to express and which ones aren't, and you actively find ways to suppress any attention-seeking, quote-unquote, behaviours. And I mean, I think it's not an uncommon story, and it's certainly not an uncommon story for women who have gone undiagnosed for a long time, because we are kind of expected to suppress quite a lot of the uncomfortable parts of ourselves because it makes other people uncomfortable. And being a parent, I've said a couple of times already, I've got 2 daughters, and probably my youngest has benefited more from my coming out experience. I don't mean that. I don't mean that. But in my discovery of being ADHD and my sort of self-worth journey and my questioning, really, why I parent the way I do, why I react to things the way that I do, where those feelings are coming from. She's benefited more from that because she was younger when I started this journey. My eldest is sort of a bridge between 2 worlds, in terms of the parenting experience she had in her formative years and the parenting experience that she's had probably about the age that my youngest is now, actually, over the last 3 or 4 years. And they both have their own ways of experiencing the world and their ways of interpreting that and their ways of expressing themselves and expressing their joy and expressing their discomfort. And interestingly, my littlest one really struggles with being perceived in the world. And I can hand on heart say that is not down to like trauma from the way that we parent, because both girls are allowed to express themselves however they want in this house. They're allowed to dress how they want, use language how they want. We don't make stupid little comments about what they're wearing or how they look or the way they've expressed an opinion, or like their life experience is valid in this house. And we frequently have really good discussions about the opinions that they have on things. That's not to say that they get away with everything and then they're told they're always right about stuff. They're not, but they're not belittled for having an opinion. When I was a child, and I was the only little child in our family for a very long time, so I was around adults that hadn't necessarily been around little children, and I was always treated like the little child. And, oh, isn't she cute? Oh, listen, she thinks she's got an opinion about something. Isn't that nice? And, I can't tell you how invalidating that was, actually, what an impact that had on me growing up. But there we go. It was different times. But we do not treat the children like that. They get to have their opinions and be heard and validated. And despite that, my youngest really struggles with being seen in the world in lots of ways. She's not afraid to stand up for herself in certain situations. She's not afraid to express her opinions in certain situations, but she does not like being perceived if she's not in the mood to be perceived. She really struggles with her appearance. She really struggles with what she's wearing in terms of what people will think of her. And I know there's been some experiences at school where kids have said unkind things in the way that kids do, but she has really taken that to heart. And I think for her, that's not come from shame of being seen as attention-seeking. That comes from her RSD I'm trying desperately to remember what that stands for. I know what it stands for, but I can't remember the specific words of what it stands for. Rejection sensitivity disorder. There we go. She really deeply feels that and really deeply sort of leans into the opinions of other people of her. And for my eldest one, who has like lived those two different parenting experiences so far in life, and she's still young, she's still only 11, but you know, those formative years was not the same parenting experience that her sisters had. Currently her self-esteem is on the floor, and she really struggles to actively take up space in terms of like if she's having trouble at school, it requires someone to come and ask her what's going on rather than her going to an adult and saying, I'm feeling this, or I'm experiencing this, or I need help with this thing. She does not want to take up space and doesn't want to be perceived in a different way. She doesn't want to be perceived because she doesn't feel like she is valid enough or valuable enough or worth enough to take up people's time. And that is quite interesting to watch as a parent. It's quite difficult, obviously, to watch as a parent. And she will take up our time at home. Don't get me wrong. She expresses herself here and she feels comfortable to express herself here. But out in the world, she's still not very comfortable to be attention-seeking. And obviously, like, when you go to high school, you don't want to be different and you don't want to... That's the same for sort of any teenager. Nobody wants negative press, do they? Nobody wants any more reasons for anyone to take the piss out of them for any reason. But even within the confines of the Learning Support Department, where it is quite safe and fluffy and welcoming, she still doesn't feel like she can go and take up that space. So we're working on that. We're working through that with her. And obviously we're working through other things with the little one. But it's just quite interesting coming from my own experiences of what it's like to sort of not be validated and sort of be seen as attention-seeking, and watching their experiences of it, given the different parenting that they've experienced over their little lifetime so far. But for me, I'm starting the process of not giving a fuck, frankly. And that's something I've been working on over quite a reasonable period of time, but certainly over the last sort of 18 months or so, trying to really embody, slowly but surely, the idea that I don't give a fuck about what other people's opinions are of me, realising, recognising and accepting the fact that generally other people's opinions of me are, one, none of my business, and two, very much a reflection of them and the state they're in and the place that they are in their lives and how they feel about themselves and how they judge themselves. And that's nothing to do with me. That's not my responsibility. So I am still, I mean, I'm by no means perfect, and I don't think I ever will be at this, but that idea that my life is mine, and I've chosen to share my life with these people around about me. So my husband and I share our lives together, obviously, and we created these children who we share our lives with, and we've got a dog who we share our life with, obviously. But we've made those commitments to one another. However, that does not then make us beholden to pleasing one another or whatever. We are still allowed to have our own thoughts and opinions and feelings and desires and ambitions, and to work with compromise in terms of like being able to sustain and follow those, and also still be supportive to those people that we've made commitments to. And so both of us are kind of pursuing that idea as adults within our family dynamic, and I'm trying to embrace it just generally as well. And one of the little things that I have done to try and reinforce that is safe within my body is such a small thing. You're gonna think this is such a small thing, but I am trying to do 10,000 steps a day. At the moment, I'm on a streak. I've been doing it for, I think I've got to nearly 200 days now where I am hitting at least 10,000 steps a day. It was an ambition of mine in 2022, and I almost made it until I got COVID at the end of November, and then that fucked up my whole year stats, and I'll never get over it. And then 2023 was a washout for various reasons. But this year, in fact, since probably September of last year, actually, I'm back on the 10,000 steps a day. And sometimes I'll do those in the house. I'll be stepping on the spot, I'll be walking up and down. Lots of the time I get those steps in by doing the school run and having the dog, obviously taking him out for walks. That gets me some good steps. However, the person that has led this sort of steps revolution in my head, Richie Howey, who is the CEO of Team RH. You may be Team RH converts out there. If you're not, you find him on Facebook. He is an absolutely no shit taking, no bullshit given fitness coach whose approach I have followed on and off for a few years. And I have his sort of voice in my head sometimes when it's like, no one gives a fuck. Like, your life is your own. Don't make excuses. If you need to get your steps in, you get your steps in, however. And so when I'm out walking the dog, anybody that has ever walked a dog will know that they like to stop and sniff things, and they like to stop and investigate things. And in my mind, I'm going, this is like wasted opportunity here. When he stops and sniffs, I'm stopping, and I could use this opportunity to actively get steps in. So I was really self-conscious about this at first, because obviously when you go out and walk the dog, generally there's other people around. You're doing this in a public place. And so this I have used as a way to try to build my not giving a fuckness about what other people think of me. So when the dog stops and sniffs, I step on the spot. And I have found this incredibly challenging to get started. And I really had to coach myself in my own head about the fact that I'm on my own journey, that when I do these steps, they're beneficial for me. They're not harming anyone. They're not causing anyone distress. I'm not sort of... It's not doing anything negative for anybody else if I stand here and step on the spot. And then I'm like, oh my God, but if I saw that, I'd be so embarrassed for that person. Because if I was driving past in my car, I'd be like, what the fuck is she doing? She looks so weird standing on the spot stepping. And then, you have to sort of bring myself down off the ceiling. And I'm like, but who cares? That person passing by, I might know them, I might not know them. I might never see them again. They might never see me again. I don't give a fuck. And then I sort of built up the idea like, oh, well, I'm going to be that crazy woman who's got the husky in the neighbourhood that stands on the spot and steps. And then it was like, and what? And what? Who gives a fuck, right? So who gives a fuck has essentially become my new life mantra. And so there's times over the last year or so, probably less than that actually, where I've had to really fight to do those steps on the spot, and really fight that sort of almost rising sense of panic, shame and embarrassment in my body. But I have noticed that over time it's gotten easier to just not give a fuck. It's easier if I'm wearing sunglasses, because for me as an autistic person, I feel like that's kind of like a little barrier to the world. If I'm wearing a hat and sunglasses, that's even easier. I've got my hood up, that's easier, because it's kind of you feel like you're being more insulated and you're less perceived by the world. But that is my little fight against other people's opinions of myself and my own shame and judgment of myself, is stepping on the spot in public. And I do it now standing at the school gate. And I have done it when I've been standing in line for things, if I'm queuing for something. I have been the person that's been standing on the spot. If I'm with other people, so if I'm with the children or my husband, I can sometimes feel their awkwardness about the fact that I'm doing it, and that sometimes makes it more difficult to do. So there are still circumstances where I find it challenging, and I'm still fighting that sense of shame, if you like. But I'm working really hard on that, not giving a fuck. Because ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, we are out here in our lives, living our lives for us. And when we die, to put it bluntly, and we look back over our lives, if we get the opportunity to look back over our lives before we die, I don't want my life to be filled with missed opportunities where somebody else random, somebody else who I know and love, somebody else's opinion stopped me from doing something that I very much want to do and achieve in life. So that's kind of tied into this idea of being attention seeking, right? Stepping on the spot when I'm out walking the dog, some people could look at that and be like, what the fuck is she doing? Who does she think she is? Why is she doing that? That's so cringe, whatever. That is entirely a you problem. If you drive past or walk past me and I'm stepping on the spot with my dog, and you have a problem with it, that is entirely a fucking you problem. And you need to look into why you find that embarrassing. Why are you experiencing second-hand embarrassment? For me, a person who's out walking the dog, standing on the street, stepping on the spot. That stepping on the spot is 1, helping me achieve my step goal, 2, helping me achieve my long-term fitness and body shape goals, 3, helping me build my sense of self-esteem and not giving a fuckness, and ultimately helping me to work towards living a happier, more settled, more secure life. What the fuck has that got to do with you? How is that embarrassing for you? So that in a really small way, it is helping me work towards all those things. And I'm not for a second advocating that you need to go out and start stepping on the spot in front of people, or whatever. But it comes down to also, when I was walking home from school today, this morning, I also started singing out loud. Because I was listening to music in my headphones and I want to sing along with it. And I know what it sounds like. I know how it sounds when someone is singing out loud to music that no one else can hear. But fuck you. Like, I don't care. I don't care. I am a singer. I'm not a karaoke singer. I'm not really a pop and rock singer. I'm more of a classical one. But I don't give a fuck what you think when I'm singing out loud to my music, because it gives me joy and pleasure. And so, fuck you. I don't care. You know, if I'm obviously I'm not going to sit in a train carriage or be on a bus singing out loud, because, you know, I'm not there. And I respect other people's space and right to not have to have me sitting next to them singing on a bus because they haven't got on the bus and expecting to be sitting next to somebody singing. But in those other situations where I'm just out walking the dog, if I want to sing along to the music that I'm hearing in my ears because it gives me pleasure, because singing really does give me pleasure, then fuck it. I'm going to do it. Fuck it. What's the worst that can happen? No one's going to arrest me. No one's going to die. It's not harmful to anyone else, so I'm going to do it. But again, that's something that people might look at and go, oh, look at her singing. Oh, you attention seeking. Like, no, I'm doing it purely for my own pleasure, my own satisfaction. I couldn't give a fuck whether you heard me, whether you thought I was good or not, whether you want to stop and make a comment in the street about how rude that is or how nice my voice is. I don't care. I'm doing it for me. I also have a TikTok account, which I've mentioned on here a few times. That is at audistically.me. And becoming visible on social media like that it has taken a lot, and I'm still working on it, because you're surrounded by sort of comments from people like, oh, that's so cringe, oh, why would you share that on social media, oh, why would you talk about your life on social media, you just want people to give you likes and give you attention. And for me, it was more of like having a video diary where I could share my experiences of existing, and see if anybody else felt the same. See if anybody else had any comments on the experiences that I was having. See if anybody else had found sort of support networks or found strategies with some of the things that I was dealing with. But also to put it out there so that other people could maybe feel not alone. That's one of the reasons that I do this podcast, is because I'm hoping that it's reaching people out there who are like laughing along and going, oh yeah, I do that, or I've experienced that, or oh, I'd never thought about that as a way to work and help with XYZ. Because it's building a sense of community, because it's building a sense of not being alone in the world. And it is scary to put yourself out there. And, you know, I've had plenty of comments on videos that have gone a little bit wider out into the world of people trying to invalidate my experience or be mean or cruel. And I genuinely have, just in the last few weeks, reached a point of being sort of secure enough in myself to go, this isn't about me, this comment isn't, it's not, I mean, it's literally on my video, but it's, the sentiment behind it is not about me. One of my lovely TikTok friends, Sophie, has also taught me that through the way that she is able to respond. She gets quite a lot of hater comments on her content. It's not funny, but the way that she responds to it is just so empowering, because she is so resolute in her opinions on things, and her feelings about things, and that is really empowering because she finds a hill and she's prepared to die on that hill, and she's prepared to defend her position on things because she believes in it, and that is hugely empowering. When I do the show notes for this, I'll put Sophie's handle. My God, that's aged me. Her TikTok thingamabob on there, so you can go and find her if you're not already following her. But it's so empowering. Her passion for what she believes in is so empowering. So Sophie, if you're listening, thank you. It's unlikely that you will be, but you have inspired me, and I want to be out there and inspiring people too. And that is cringe. Some people might say that is cringe, but I don't want to see myself as cringe. I want to see myself as somebody who's out there making an impact, a positive impact on the world. Hence why I do this podcast and have that TikTok account. I do have other social media, but I genuinely don't have the bandwidth to maintain like 5 different social media profiles. So I have got an Instagram and I have got a Facebook page, but I don't maintain those really at all, because TikTok is the place that I am and this podcast is the place that I am. So I hope that that's resonated out there in the world. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching. If you've got any sort of comments that you want to make on this, or anything, experiences that you want to share, then my contact details are in the show notes. My email address you can find on my profile. And I've had some lovely emails actually from people who listen, so thank you so much. I don't get very many emails, so I do read them all. So if you've got anything you want to share, then please do get in contact with me. If you want to come and collaborate and be on the podcast and share a topic, then please get in touch. If you've got anything that you would like me to delve into to share on the podcast, then please get in touch. If there's anything that I haven't covered so far and you think, oh, Jenny, I really wonder whether you experienced this, or you could tell us a little bit more about why or whatever, please get in touch, and I will do my best to research and share those things out with you. But it's been a joy to ramble on about the things that I've talked about today. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.